So this video is addressed to people who have been into non-duality for a while and have been using non-duality as a way of escaping the suffering that the trauma has caused them. So when we experience trauma, we enter into a period of suffering. And then usually with that suffering, we start doing self-help, therapy, whatever it is to try and heal. And then at a certain point, a certain level of awareness of our thoughts has come in. Maybe we read Eckhart Tolle. A certain level of awareness comes in whereby we start resonating with the teachings of non-duality. And usually, which is what happened to myself, we get into this phase of watching loads and loads of non-duality videos. And we hear the promise of non-duality, that if we realize that the separate self is an illusion, if we realize ourselves as awareness, then all of our problems will disappear. And many of us think that if we just have this one recognition, which all these teachers are pointing to, that will resolve all of our psychological, emotional problems. And for many years, we can really dive into these practices of presence, self-inquiry, coming to recognize the peace that passes understanding, coming to recognize the awareness which knows our experience. And within this awareness, coming to be aware of awareness, there is a sense of peace. Awareness is peace. Awareness is naturally joyful. And there is a certain level of happiness and goodness that comes online when we listen to non-duality and when we start opening to what non-dual teachers are pointing towards. But for most of us, we get into listening to non-duality videos because we're in pain and suffering, and because we're trying to escape our pain and suffering. And so we start to use these practices, this simple practice of resting in and as awareness. We start to use this as a way to get away from our pain and suffering. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this, because anything that life has given us which acts as a motivator to point us towards truth is absolutely wonderful. If I didn't have all of the suffering that I've had through my life, if I wasn't immensely suffering in my early 20s and through my 20s, then I would not have had the motivation to inquire into and to open up to the peace, joy, fulfillment and goodness of being. So it is absolutely wonderful, and it's absolutely right that our suffering points us towards this, that our suffering drives us back home. But what I've found, both within myself and with many people that I've been working with over the years on Zoom, is that this, especially if you've experienced trauma, if you've experienced difficulty, if you have anxiety, if you have chronic tension, if you have all of these sort of psychological, emotional, somatic issues, this being in awareness doesn't fully give you the relief that you want. It doesn't give you what you want. Of course, it can seem like it does at times. If on a Sunday evening after work you stick a Rupert Spira video on and you start melting into being, it's absolutely wonderful. and there is an immense fulfillment in that. But if we have a lot of trauma, what tends to happen is that it doesn't quite touch it. Even though we know we're at peace, and we know that there's a piece of awareness here, and we're feeling that piece of awareness, and we're in our being, something still, it's like, it still doesn't feel quite right. We're still listening to those videos. We're still hoping that I'm going to have this big opening experience. I'm going to have this big realization, and suddenly all of the pain and suffering is going to disappear. But I would say for people who've experienced trauma, for the majority of people, maybe not everyone, non-duality probably isn't enough. And as well as what is really an up-out approach of non-dual pointings and self-inquiry, we also need to deeply engage in an in, down, and through approach to spirituality. We need to include somatic healing and repression work within our practice. Because my question to you would be, you may be saying to yourself that I'm happy, I'm at peace, I know myself as awareness, all of this stuff. But if you were really, truly honest, just honest like a child, would there not be something within you which is in pain? Something within you which is still struggling? Something within you in a very human way which is still searching? Of course, that you can be planted and rested within something which isn't searching, and that's an amazing step. But also, there may be something within you which feels like there's further to go. There's a deeper relief which can come. There's a richer way still to live life. And it doesn't matter how many hours of your favorite non-duality teacher you watch, and how many hours you spend bathing and resting and tasting and being in the peace of awareness, that still something within your humanity hasn't been touched. And if this is the case for you, then I would say to get really honest with yourself. Like, if you'd never heard of non-duality before, if you'd never heard of awareness practices, what story would you want to tell? Because in spirituality, we also demonize from a place of just madness. We demonize telling our story. And I did this for many years. I felt shame if I would speak to a therapist or a non-duality teacher about my story, because a lot of non-duality teachers say, oh, that's just a story, forget the story. No, don't forget the story, because there's healing within the story. We need to tell our story. If somebody tells you to just forget your story, yeah, that's what's needed at times. At times we do need to come away from the story. At times we do need to find freedom from that mind. It's really important that we can step into awareness. But at times we need to tell our story. There's a story within the throat which needs to be told. And the throat is often holding down our pain. Now for me, for many years when I was deeply into non-duality, and I still am deeply into non-duality, don't get me wrong, but I was very into resting as awareness and being awareness, and as well as that I was into feeling the sensations within the body. Now, if a certain sensation within the body, like a holding in the throat or a clenching in the belly, is coming up every time you're resting as awareness, then I would say that that awareness isn't getting into the root of your pain. And it may be that the throat is locking the pain down. And so what I like to do, and what I think is absolutely essential, is we need to tell our story. And don't worry about becoming identified with it. It doesn't matter. You can't lose what you are. You're not going to lose what you are by telling a story. You don't even have to fully believe the story. But in the moment of telling your story, do fully believe it. Pretend at least to fully believe it. Live out the story. How would you, if you were a 4-year-old child and you'd been through all the pain that you've been through, what would you say to your parents if they were completely unconditionally loving towards you? The child wouldn't say, oh, I'm feeling some pain, but it's okay because I know that I'm actually awareness. Even if you're feeling yourself as awareness, that doesn't mean you need to be dishonest to your experience. If you're whatever you're feeling, and we can become so dissociated from what we're feeling that we don't even know that we have a well of sadness within us. We don't even know the amount of shame that we may be carrying inside. We might not even be aware of the anger that we have inside, because we were probably dissociating it from it before we got into non-duality, and then non-duality may have become another way to simply dissociate from pain. And there's a coldness in that. There's a coldness in a lot of people who are deeply into non-duality. And the coldness comes from cutting yourself off from your body, cutting yourself off from your deeper feelings, not telling your story, not allowing yourself to be fully human. So I'm going to give a practice to you. This evening, whenever you have a free moment where no one's around, pretend you've never heard of non-duality. Pretend you've never heard of spiritual awakening. Sit on your couch and ask yourself, ask your body, what do you really want to say? What's really true? What do you really fucking want to say? What would you really want to say to your parents if you could? You may be angry. You may be sad. You may just want to say, I am so sad. I am so scared. And in admitting what we're actually feeling, then it can open the throat. And the pain which got us into non-duality in the first place may begin to empty out of us. And every time you shed a single tear, then you open up a space within your heart, space within your body, for the awareness that you've recognized to really light up within your experience. We hear about enlightenment. And you know, when you see some of these non-duality teachers and you're like, right, I've heard about enlightenment, and I'm looking at them, and they obviously like know something about awareness, but they don't seem that enlightened. I'm not exactly getting a transmission of bliss and joy. Well, there's a difference between simply knowing awareness out of the connection to the body and opening up our nervous system, opening space up within our nervous system, doing our healing work, emptying out our trauma, emptying out our pain, and then allowing that light of awareness to come and merge with our body and shine through our body. And this is a process which, Jesus, I'm certainly still in. A process of uncovering and lifting the repression that we have within our system. And you don't have to lose your freedom for this process. I'm lucky I have an amazing therapist who I can work with whenever I want. Usually I see her once every couple of weeks, and so much pain empties out of me. Every 2 weeks, so much pain empties out of me. We have a lot in there. And yeah, as well as being absolutely devoted to truth and devoted to freedom and enjoying the freedom, enjoying non-duality, enjoying resting in this beingness that we are, enjoying this fucking expansiveness, we can work on healing our nervous system, healing our bodies. Because I would rather hang around with somebody who is psychologically healthy and has a beautiful heart full of love, but has no idea about non-duality, than somebody who is a fanatic, non-dual YouTube watcher who is dissociated and not in their body and not in their hearts. But why not have both? To awaken to being, to heal and mature as a human being through the path of somatic healing and lifting repression. So Alex, my business partner, he's much more experienced than me in repression work. So I'm going to get him to jump on the channel soon and really give some solid guidance in how we can reach the feelings that are below the surface. And I'll just say one more thing. We may feel like we're feeling our feelings, but quite often the sensations at the surface of our body that we're feeling, that we're focusing on, that we're being present with, and that's an amazing practice, and it brings a lot of freedom, and it really helps you grow in presence, staying with sensations. But those sensations at the surface of our body may simply be a symptom of the deeper repressed emotions which we are terrified to feel. So I hope in this video you can feel this sense of warmth, because even in me speaking about this, there's an incredible sense of inner warmth within my experience, a sense of wholeness, a sense of completion. And there were times when I was completely ignoring my human self, focusing on being aware of being aware. And that was cool, that was peaceful, that was fun, that was epic, but it was missing warmth. And the warmth comes back online when we wholeheartedly embrace ourselves, when we become willing to tell our story. If you can find someone to tell your story to, then I highly recommend it. And if you can't, then I recommend you write it down, or you speak it out loud. If you've been through something traumatic or many traumatic things in your life, or you've had a really traumatic time in your life, who did you need and want to express it to at the time that it happened? You imagine them in front of you and you have that conversation. And you won't just need to have that conversation once, you'll need to have that conversation many times. And be aware of the pain that may arise in that. Be aware of what you really need to say, what you really wanted to say, but were unable or unwilling to. There wasn't the space for it. Okay, my friends, much love to you. Peace.